Did you hear what I was playing, Lane?
No, sir. I didn't think it polite to listen.
Oh, I'm sorry for that. Have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night, when Lord John and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that at a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I have often observed that in married households, the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is an excellent state, sir, although I have very limited experience of it myself. You see, I have only been married once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and the young person.
I don't believe I'm much interested in your family life, Lane.
No, sir, it is not very interesting. I rarely think of it myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. That'll do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. I mean, really, if the lower orders don't set us a good example, what on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class to have absolutely no sense of their moral responsibility.
Mr. Earnest Worthing.
How do you do, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring one anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I do believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh, in the country.
What on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are the people you amuse?
Oh, neighbors. Neighbors.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire.
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to any of them.
Oh, how immensely you must amuse them. Oh, by the way, Shropshire is your county.
Shropshire? Yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups, sir? Why cucumber sandwiches? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta. And Gwendolen.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you'd come up for pleasure. I call that business.
How utterly unromantic you are.
I really don't see anything romantic in proposing. It is perfectly romantic to be in love, but there is nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. But then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. They are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She is my aunt. Here, have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolen. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter it is too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat it as if you were going to eat it all. You behave as though you are married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, in the first place, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
Oh, that is nonsense.
It isn't. It's a great truth. It comes with the extraordinary number of bachelors one sees all over town. In the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent?
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin. Before I will allow you to marry her, you are going to have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What on earth do you mean, Algy? What do you mean by Cecily? I don't know anyone of the name of Cecily.
Lane, remember that cigar case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here?
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigar case all this time? I wish to goodness you would have let me know. I had been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. I was very nearly offering a very large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I haven't been more than usually hard up.
There's no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think it rather mean of you, Ernest. But now that I look in the inscription inside, I see the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it is mine. You've seen me with it 100 times. And it is a very ungentlemanly thing to read what's written in a private cigar case.
This is not your cigar case. This cigar case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. You said you didn't know anyone of the name.
Well, if I'm going to be honest, Cecily is my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, yes. Charming old lady she is too. Lives up at Tunbridge Wells. Just give it to me, Algy.
Yes, but why does she call herself Little Cecily if she's your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
What is there in that? Some aunts are tall. Some aunts are not tall. I think it should be up to an aunt to decide that for herself. You seem to think that every aunt should be like your aunt. That is absurd. For heaven's sakes, Algy, give me back my cigar case.
Yes, but why does she call you her dear uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There's no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt. But why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, my name is Jack.
You always told me it was Earnest. I've introduced you to everyone as Earnest. You answer to the name of Ernest. You look as though your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking people I ever saw in my life. It's perfectly absurd just saying your name isn't Ernest. Here, it's on your card. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I shall keep this if you ever attempt to deny the fact that your name is Ernest to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town, and Jack in the country. And that cigar case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small Aunt Cecily lives at Tunbridge Wells, calls you her dear uncle. I must say, I've always suspected you of being a confirmed and secret Bunburyist, and now I'm quite sure of it.
What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
I'll reveal to you the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to tell me why you are Ernest in the town and Jack in the country.
Well, produce my cigar case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation.
Well, old Mr. Thomas Cardew, who adopted me when I was a little boy, made me in his will guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew, who addresses me as her uncle out of motives of respect you can't possibly appreciate, and lives with me under the country, under the care of her esteemed governess, Miss Prism.
Where is that place in the country, by the way?
What is it to you? You are not going to be invited. I may tell you quite candidly that the place is not in Shropshire.
Oh, I suspected that, my dear fellow. I've Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in the town and Jack in the country?
When one is placed in the position of guardian, one has to adopt a very high moral tone on all subjects. And as a high moral tone can hardly be said to conduce to one's health or happiness. In order to get up to town, I have always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Earnest who lives at the Albany and gets into the most dreadful of scrapes. There, Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
The truth is rarely pure and never simple. What you are is a Bunburyist. You're one of the most advanced Bunburyists I ever knew.
What on earth do you mean?
You have invented a very useful younger brother of the name Earnest in order that you may be able to come up to town whenever you like. I have invented a permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go to the country whenever I like. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it weren't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I wouldn't be able to dine with you at the Carlton tonight, for I've been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You are very careless about sending out your invitation. It's very foolish of you. Nothing annoys people more than not receiving invitations.
Oh, you had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
I haven't the slightest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is more than enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family and sent up with either no woman at all or two. In the third place, I know perfectly well who she will place me next to tonight. She will place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. That is not very pleasant. In fact, it's not even decent, and that kind of thing is enormously on the increase in London. The amount of women who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It's simply washing one's clean linens in public. Besides, now that I know you are a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunbury. I want to tell you the news.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. In fact, if Gwendolyn accepts me, I am going to kill my brother. In fact, I'll probably kill him anyways. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It's a bore. But I'm going to get rid of Ernest, and I suggest you do the same with with your invalid friend, that absurd name.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. And if you ever do get married, which seems to be extremely problematic, you would be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries not knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
If I marry Gwendolyn, and she's the only girl I've ever loved, I certainly won't know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to understand, my dear fellow, that in married life, 3 is company, and 2 is none. That must be Aunt Augusta. Now, if I can get her out of the way for 10 minutes in order that you might be able to propose to Gwendolyn, may I dine with you at the Carlton tonight?
I suppose so.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about meals. It's so shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Well, dear Algernon, I hope you are behaving well.
I'm feeling well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two rarely go together. Good afternoon, Mr. Worthing. How do you do?
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
Oh, you are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
I am sorry if we are a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call upon dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I never saw a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. I will have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Good heavens, Lane! Why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially.
There were none in the market this morning, sir. I checked twice.
No cucumbers?
Not even for ready money.
That'll do, Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumbers in the market. Not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair has turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed color. From what cause, I, of course, cannot say. Thank you. Oh, I have quite a treat for you tonight, Algernon. I am going to send you down with Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice young lady, and so attentive to her husband. It's delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid I'll have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight after all, Aunt Augusta.
I hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
It's a great bore, but I've just received a telegram saying that my poor friend Bunbury is very ill again. They seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, Algernon, I must say that I think it is high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd, nor do I in any way approve of this modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Well, illness of any kind is hardly a thing to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of life. I'm always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take any notice, as far as improvements in his many ailments goes. Well, I would be much obliged if you would ask Mr. Banbury, if from me, to not have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something to encourage conversation, particularly at the end of the season when everyone has said practically whatever they have to say.
I'll speak to Bunbury, Aunt Augusta, if he is still conscious, and I think I can promise that he'll be all right on Saturday. Of course, the music is a great difficulty, but I'll run over the program I've drawn out if you'll come into the next room with me for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. That is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful. After a few expurgations. Gwendolen, you will follow.
Certainly, Mamma.
Charming day it is, Miss Fairfax.
Pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I feel quite certain they mean something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so.
And I would like to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I've had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I've met you, I've loved you more than any girl I've met since I met you.
I'm quite aware of that fact, and I often wish that in public, at any rate, you would have been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Why, even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. Why, the fact is constantly being mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines. And my ideal has always been to love someone by the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. Why, the moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen.
Passionately.
Oh, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
Of course. You don't mean to say you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest.
But your name is Earnest.
Yes. Yes, of course. But supposing it was something else, are you saying you couldn't love me then?
That is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And like all metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of life as we know them.
Personally, darling, I don't much like the name of Ernest. I don't think it suits me at all.
Oh, it suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
I just think there are a lot of much nicer names. Take Jack, for instance. A charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music at all in the name of Jack. If any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. Why, I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. Why, she would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. No, the only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolen, I must be christened at once. No, I mean, we must be married at once.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Why, of course. You know how much I love you, and you have led me to believe you're not so indifferent to me yourself.
Oh, I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Why, nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched upon.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it's only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Then, Gwendolen, you will marry me?
Of course I will, darling. how long you have been about it. I'm afraid you have had very little experience in how to propose.
My own one, you're the only girl I've ever loved.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. Ernest, what wonderfully blue eyes you have. They are quite blue. Oh, I hope you will always look at me just like this, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise to serve in this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I'm engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to anyone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should always come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant, as the case may be. It is hardly a matter that she should be allowed to arrange for herself. And now, I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. And while I am making these inquiries, you will wait for me in the carriage below, Gwendolen.
Mamma!
In the carriage.
Yes, Mamma.
Gwendolen, the carriage! And take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thanks, Lady Bracknell, but I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men, although I had the same list as the dear Duchess of Bolton has. We work together, in fact. However, I am quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a really affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I do smoke.
I am glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
35.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
Well, Lady Bracknell, I must admit I know nothing.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it, and the bloom is gone. What is your income?
Oh, about £7,000 to £8,000 a year.
In land or investments?
Oh, in investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected of one during one's life and the duties exacted from one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That is all that can be said about land.
I do own a house in the country with land attached to it, of course. It's not that much, though, only about 1,500 acres. As far as I can see, the only ones who gain any value from the land are the poachers.
A country house? Well, how many bedrooms? If that can be cleared up later, you do have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple, unspoiled nature like Gwendolyn, who can hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Yes, I do own a house in Belgrave Square. I do let it out, though, to Lady Bluxham. With 6 months' notice, I can get it back.
Lady Bloxham? I do not know her.
She's rather elderly, doesn't get out much anymore.
Ah, well, nowadays that is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
Oh, the unfashionable side. I thought there was something. But that can easily be altered. Now on to minor matters. Are your parents living?
Lady Bracknell, I've lost both my parents.
Both? To lose one parent, it may be regarded as misfortune. To lose both just seems like carelessness. Who was your father? He seems to have been a man of wealth. he born into what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, Lady Bracknell, I had said earlier that I had lost my parents, but it's nearer the truth to say that they had lost me. I don't really know who I am. I was found.
Found?
Yes, I was found by Mr. Thomas Cardew. An old charitable gentleman found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he had a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time.
Where did the charitable gentleman with the first-class ticket to Worthing find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, a large leather handbag with handles, of course. A very ordinary handbag.
In what locality did this Mr. Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the Victoria Station cloakroom. It was given to him on mistake for his own.
Mr. Worthing, I must confess I feel somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred, into a handbag, whether it had handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what that unfortunate movement led to. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station, it might serve to conceal a social indiscretion, and has indeed probably been used for that very purpose before now. But it can hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a recognized position in good society.
Well, what would you wish me do? You know how much I love Gwendolyn.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce, at any rate, one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
I don't know how you suppose me to do that. I can give you the handbag at any moment. It's in my dressing room at home. I really think that should satisfy you.
Me, sir? What has it got to do with me? You can hardly imagine that Lord Bracknell and I would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a handbag. Good evening, Mr. Worthing.
Good evening.
For heaven's sakes, Algy, stop playing that ghastly tune.
How idiotic you are.
Didn't it go off all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you?
As far as Gwendolyn is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. Never met such a gorgon. Algy, you don't think it's possible that Gwendolyn could become anything like her mother in 150 years or anything like that?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. No man does, that's his.
Oh, how clever you are.
It's perfectly phrased and quite as true as any observation in civilized life need be.
I hate cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting someone clever. It's a perfect public nuisance. I wish to goodness we still had a few fools left.
We have.
Well, what do they talk about?
The fools? Oh, about the clever people, of course. By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn about your being Earnest in the town and Jack in the country?
The truth isn't something you tell to a sweet, refined girl like Gwendolyn. What absurd ideas you have about the way to talk to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she's pretty and someone else if she's plain.
Oh, that is nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Oh, well, I've got rid of him by the end of the week. I'll say he died abroad in Paris. Of apoplexy. A lot of people die of apoplexy, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. You'd much better say a severe chill.
And you are sure a severe chill isn't hereditary or anything like that?
Of course it isn't.
Very well then. My poor brother Ernest is suddenly carried off in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest.
Cecily is not a silly, romantic girl at all. She has a capital appetite, goes on long walks, and refuses to pay attention to her lessons.
I should like to see Cecily.
I will make very good sure you never do. She is excessively pretty and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn that you have an excessively pretty young ward who's only just 18?
One doesn't just blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly capable of becoming great friends. I'll bet you anything you like that within 30 minutes of meeting each other, they'll be calling each other sister.
Women only do that after they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, my dear fellow, if we want to get a good table for Carlton, let's really go and dress. Hungry.
I never knew you when you weren't.
Well, what shall we do after dinner? Go to a theatre?
Oh no, I loathe listening.
Well, let us go to the club.
Oh no, I can't stand talking to people.
Well, we could trot round the Empire around 10.
Oh no, I can't stand looking at things.
Well, what shall we do then?
No, oh nothing.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow this at all.
Algy, pray oblige me and turn your back. Ernest, we may never be married. From the look on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what their children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is rapidly dying out. Whatever influence I had over Mamma, I lost at the age of 3. But though she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing that she can possibly say can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma, with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name is irresistible, and the simplicity of your character makes you exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Walton, Hertfordshire.
How long are you in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn round now.
Oh, thanks, I've turned round already.
You may also ring the bell.
Miss Fairfax, you will let me see you to your carriage.
Certainly.
Lane, I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
A glass of sherry, Lane.
Yes, sir.
Lane, tomorrow, I'm going Bunbury.
Yes, sir.
I should not be back till Monday. You can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all the Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
Lane, I hope tomorrow will be a fine day.
It never is, sir.
Lane, you are a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to provide satisfaction, sir.
Oh, Algy. There is a sweet, simple, intellectual girl. The only girl I've ever loved. What on earth is so funny about that?
Oh, I'm just a little anxious about poor Bunbury, that's all.
If you're not careful, your friend Bunbury is going to get you into a very serious scrape.
Oh, I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
What nonsense, Algy. You never talk anything but nonsense.
Nobody ever does. Besides, I love nonsense. The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
Cecily? Cecily, surely it is more Moulton's duty to water the flowers than yours. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it to page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well I always look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he left for town yesterday.
Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes I think he is so serious that he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor is specially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one with a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
I suppose that is why he so often looks a little bored when the three of us are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversations. And you mustn't forget his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I wish Uncle Jack would allow him to come here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I know you certainly would. You know, German and geology and things of that kind. Well, that influence amounts so much.
I do not think that even I would produce any effect on a character that, according to his own brother's admissions, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I am not sure that I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I would probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary that we all carry about with us.
Yes, but memory usually chronicles the things that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightly of novels, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Oh, was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript was unfortunately abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
Oh, but I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble? This is indeed a pleasure.
How are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good to have a short stroll with you in the park, Dr. Chasuble.
Cecily, I have not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that, but I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about it and not about my German when the dear rector came in.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
Oh, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically, of course. The metaphor was drawn from bees.
Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not yet returned from town?
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes, of course. He's not one of those whose sole aim is enjoyment, as, by all accounts, that unfortunate young man, his younger brother, seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her pupil any longer.
Egeria? My name is Letitia, Doctor.
A classical allusion, merely drawn from the pagan authors. I will see you both, no doubt, at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, that I will have a stroll with you. I find I do have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism. With pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That would be delightful. Cecily, in my absence, you will read your political economy. The chapter on the fall of the rupee you may omit. It is somewhat too exciting for a young girl.
Horrid political economy. Horrid geography. Horrid German.
A Mr. Earnest Worthing has just arrived. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany W. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I told him you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Well, ask Mr. Earnest Worthing to come out here. I suppose we'd better speak to the housekeeper about getting a room ready for him.
Yes, miss.
I have never met any really wicked person before. I feel rather frightened. I'm afraid he will look just like anyone else. He does.
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. But I am your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I'm not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think I'm wicked.
If you are not, then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you have not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and really being good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Oh, of course I have been rather reckless.
I'm pleased to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I happen to have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that. Though I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
It is much pleasanter being here with you.
I can't understand how you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment, as I'm obliged to go up on Monday morning.
I think you'd better wait till Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your emigrating.
About my what?
You're emigrating. Uncle Jack is sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, he said at dinner on Wednesday night that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh well, the accounts I've received about Australia and the next world are not encouraging. This world is good enough for me, cousin Cecily.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not that. That is why I wanted you to reform me. You might make that your mission, if you don't mind, cousin Cecily.
Oh, I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Well, would you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
It is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
Oh, how thoughtless of me. I should have remembered that when one is going to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Won't you come in?
Thank you. Won't you give me a buttonhole?
A Marshall meal?
No, I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Why?
Because you are like a pink rose, cousin Cecily.
I don't think it could be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
And Miss Prism is a very short-sighted old lady. You're the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that all good looks are a snare.
They are a snare that every sensible man would love to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I would care to catch a sensible man. I wouldn't know what to talk to him about.
Where is Cecily? Dear Dr. Chasuble, you are too much alone. You should be married. A misanthrope I can understand. A woman, never.
Believe me, I do not deserve so neologistic a phrase. The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church is distinctly against matrimony.
Well, that is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted up to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation. Men should be more careful. This very celibacy leads weaker vessels astray.
But isn't it equally attractive when married?
Oh, no married man is ever attracted, except to his wife.
And often I'm told, not even to her.
But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing! This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you till Monday afternoon.
I had not expected to get back so soon. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagancies.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead!
Your brother Ernest dead.
Quite dead.
Lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolences. You at least have the consolation of knowing that you were always the most generous and forgiving of brothers.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is indeed a sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died abroad in Paris. I got a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of his death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
Oh, none of us are perfect. I myself am particularly susceptible to drafts. Will the interment take place here?
No, he seems to have expressed the desire to be buried in Paris.
In Paris? I fear that hardly points to any very serious state of mind, alas. You would no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction in my sermon next Sunday. Well, my sermon on the meaning of the manna and the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion. Joyful, or as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation, and on festal days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral, as a charity sermon on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent Among the Upper Classes. The bishop, who was present, was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
Ah, that reminds me, dear doctor. You mentioned christenings. You do know how to christen, all right. I mean, of course, you are continually christening, aren't you?
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's more constant duties in the parish. I've often spoken to the poorer classes on it, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
Mr. Worthing, is there any particular infant in whom you are interested? Your brother was unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes. Quite unmarried.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
No, this christening isn't for any child. I am very fond of children. No, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon. You have no qualms against it.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember a thing about it. Of course, if you think I'm too old or you don't think it's right.
Oh, not at all. The sprinkling and indeed immersion of an adult is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
Oh, no, you need not have apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, and indeed, I find it advisable. Our weather is so changeable. Around what hour would you wish the ceremony to be performed?
I might try round about 5, if that would work.
Oh, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar ceremonies to be performed around that time. A case of twins that occurred recently on an outlying cottage on one of your own estates. Paul Jenkins, the carter. Most hard-working man.
Oh, I don't want to be christened with other children. It would be childish. Would 5:30 work?
Admirably, admirably. And now, Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you to be not too much bowed down by grief. What seems to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind.
Uncle Jack, I am pleased to see you back. Oh, what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
Uncle Jack, what is the matter? You look as if you have had toothache. And I have got such a surprise. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother. Ernest, he arrived here half an hour ago.
What on earth does that mean? I don't have a brother.
Don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out. And you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we'd all been resigned to his loss, His sudden return seems to me peculiarly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what it means. It's perfectly absurd. Good heavens. Go away.
Sean, I've just come up from town to tell you I'm very sorry for all the trouble I've given you, and I intend to lead a better life in the future.
Go away.
Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. His coming down here is perfectly disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest here has just been telling me of his poor invalid friend whom he goes to visit so often.
Well, I admit the faults were all on my side, though I do think Brother John's coldness to me to be peculiarly painful, especially considering this is the first time I've come up here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
I suppose I must then.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? Oh, come now. Let us leave the two brothers alone.
Cecily, you will come with me.
Certainly, Miss Prism.
Ouch. You young scoundrel. You must leave this place at once. I don't allow any bunburying here.
I've taken Mr. Earnest's things and put them in the room next to your own. I suppose that's all right, sir?
What?
Mr. Earnest's luggage, sir. I've unpacked it and put it in the room next to your own.
I'm afraid I can't stay longer than a week at this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Earnest has been suddenly called back up to town.
Jack, Cecily is a darling.
You are not to talk about Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. Why on earth don't you go up and change? It's perfectly childish to be in deep mourning for someone who happens to be staying with you in your own house as a guest. I call it grotesque.
Ouchie, you're not staying in my house as a guest or anything else. You must leave by the 4:05 train.
Oh, I couldn't leave you while you were in mourning. I would think it most unkind. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me, I suppose. I would think it very unfriendly if you didn't.
Well, will you leave if I change my clothes?
Yes, I suppose so, if you're not too long about it. I've never seen anybody take so long to dress and with such little result.
But I've never seen anyone as overdressed as you always are.
I'm in love with Cecily. I must see her before I go. There she is.
I merely came back to water the flowers. I thought you were out with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Then we have got to part.
I'm afraid so.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Marilyn, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Cecily, I hope I should not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary? I'd give anything to look at it. May I?
Oh, no. You see, it is simply a very young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and subsequently not meant for publication. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I've nearly reached absolute perfection. You may go on. I'm quite ready for more.
Cecily, ever since I first looked upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily?
The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour.
Yes, sir.
I think Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on till next week at the same hour.
Oh, I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anybody in the world but you. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy. Of course. We have been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months?
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
But how did we become engaged?
Well, ever since dear Uncle Jack first confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And, of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels there must be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling, and when was the engagement actually settled?
On the 14th of April last. Worn out by your entire ignorance to my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or another. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted your hair. And the next day, I went into town and bought this little ring in your name. And this is the bangle with the true lover's knot for which I promised you always to wear.
Did I give you this? It's very pretty, isn't it?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, then. It's the excuse I've always given for your leading such a bad life. And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters? But my own sweet Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write all your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week, and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, I couldn't possibly. They would make you far too conceited.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy.
You'll never break off our engagement, Cecily.
I don't think I could, now that I've actually met you. Besides, of course, there is the question of your name.
Yes, of course.
Now, you mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it has always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. Oh, I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
But my own sweet child, you don't mean to say that if my name were something else, you couldn't love me.
But what name?
Oh, any name you like. Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
Well, my own dear, sweet, loving little darling, I really don't think you should object to the name of Algernon. It's not at all a bad name. In fact, it is a very aristocratic name. But seriously, Cecily, if my name were Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you. I might admire your character, but I fear that I would not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in all the rites and ceremonials of the church.
Oh, yes. Dr. Chasuble is a much-learned man. He has never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him on a matter of important Christie. I mean business. I'll be back in no time.
What an impetuous boy he is. I will enter his proposal into my diary.
A Miss Fairfax just called to see Mr. Worthing. On very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Is it Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went over the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon, and you can bring us tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax, I suppose one of the many good elderly women who are associated with Uncle Jack and his philanthropic work in London. I don't quite like the women who are interested in philanthropic work. I think it is so forward of them.
Miss Fairfax.
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew. What a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say, and my first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we have known each other for such a comparatively short amount of time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all settled then, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this might be favorable for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You've never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It's part of her system. So you do not mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. I'm very fond of being looked at.
Oh. You're here on a short visit, I suppose?
Oh, no, I live here.
Really?
Yes, my mother, who is not here at present, I am being watched by my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
Your guardian? Oh, 'tis strange. He never mentioned to me that he was a guardian. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I cannot say, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I'm very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But now that I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I feel bound to state that I cannot help expressing the wish that you were, well, just a little older than you appeared to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak quite candidly,
Pray do. I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
well, to speak with perfect candor, I wish that you were fully 35 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. Why, he is the very soul of truth and honor. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Ernest?
Why, yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Oh, Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I am sorry to say that they have not been on good terms for a long time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And come to think of it, I've never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. However, you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his.
I beg your pardon.
My dearest Gwendolen, there is no reason for me to make it of any secret to you. Our little county newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My dear Cecily, there must be some slight error, for Mr. Earnest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
Well, that certainly is very curious, for Ernest asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you wish to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel anywhere without my diary. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish. But I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have got into, I will never reproach him with it, after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? Oh, you are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a responsibility to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into our engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say that I have never seen a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been widely different.
Shall I tea here as usual, miss?
Yes, as usual.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea that there were any flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody can survive in the country if anybody who is anybody does. The country always bores me to death.
Ah, that is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I hear that the aristocracy are suffering greatly at present. It is almost an epidemic amongst them, I've been told. May I offer you some tea?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays. You have filled my cup with lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my character. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
From the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are engaged to this young lady?
To dear little Cecily? Of course not. What put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is at present round your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
I beg your pardon.
This is my Uncle Jack.
Jack? Oh!
Dearest Ernest,
My own love.
a moment. May I ask if you're engaged to this young lady?
To what young lady? Gwendolyn? Why, of course not. What could have put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I thought there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is currently embracing you is my dear cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh, are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh, is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But my name, certainly, is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on both of us. My poor wounded Cecily. My sweet wronged Gwendolyn.
You will call me sister, will you not?
There is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An admirable idea. Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? It seems to me that we are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is a question of some importance to us to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it is very painful to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I've ever been placed in such an awful position. And I must say, I'm quite inexperienced in it. But, if I'm going to be quite candid, I have no brother Ernest. I don't even have a brother at all. I never had a brother, and I certainly don't intend on having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Have you never had a brother of any kind?
Never, not even of any kind.
I'm afraid it is quite clear that neither of us are engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Come, let us go into the house. They shall hardly venture to come after us in there.
No, men are such cowards, aren't they?
I suppose this wretched state of affairs is what you call Bunburying.
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful Bunbury it is. The most wonderful Bunbury I ever had in my life.
Well, you have no right whatsoever to Bunbury here.
That is absurd. One has the right to Bunbury anywhere one chooses. Every serious Bunburist knows that.
Serious Bunburists.
Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about Bunbury. What you are serious about, I haven't the remotest idea. About everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature.
As far as I can see, the only positive thing I can glean from this entire situation is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run out to the country as often as you used to, dear Algy. And a good thing at that, too.
Your brother is a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear off to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was. And not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct toward Miss Cardew, I must say your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl is quite inexcusable. Not to mention the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible offence at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax. To say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to marry Gwendolen. I love her.
Well, I simply want to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of your being united with Miss Fairfax.
How can you sit there, calmly eating muffins when we're in this wretched state of affairs? It's perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. But we get on one's cuffs. The only way to eat muffins is quite calmly.
It's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all under the circumstances.
When I'm in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I'm in deep trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately might tell you, I refuse anything except food and drink. At the present moment, I'm eating muffins because I'm unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Well, you shouldn't be eating them all in that greedy way.
I wish you would take tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Can't a man eat his own muffins in his own garden?
You've just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
No, I didn't. I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is an entirely different thing.
The muffins are the same.
Algy, why won't you go?
I could not. I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45, under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up this nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30. And I, naturally, will take the name of Earnest. We can't both be christened Earnest. It would be absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I have ever been christened by anybody. I should think it extremely likely I never was so. And so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened.
Yes, but I've not been christened for years.
But you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you're not quite sure of your ever having been christened, I would think it extremely dangerous you're venturing upon it now. It might make you unwell. Besides, you can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected to you was very nearly carried off in Paris by a severe chill. Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. I told you I was particularly fond of muffins.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go. I don't want you here. Why won't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet.
You're drinking my tea.
It's not your tea. You're eating my muffins.
They are not your muffins.
The fact that they did not follow us into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They have been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They're looking at us. What effrontery!
They're approaching. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to be producing an unpleasant effect.
Most distasteful.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, I have something very particular to ask you. Much depends on your reply.
Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have the opportunity of meeting you.
Well, that certainly seems like a most satisfactory explanation.
Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer for pretending to have a brother? Was it in order that you might come up to town to see me as often as possible?
Certainly, Miss Fairfax.
The explanations appear to be quite satisfactory. Do you think we should forgive them?
Yes.
No! True, I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. But which one of us should tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier. That is all.
Will you take the time for me?
Our Christian names? Is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you're prepared to do this terrible thing?
I am.
To please me, you are ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. When questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage of which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling.
Darling.
Lady Bracknell.
Oh, good heavens.
Gwendolen! What does this mean?
Merely that I'm engaged to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Sit down. Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by a luggage train. Of course, Mr. Worthing, you will clearly understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately from this moment. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
But Lady Bracknell, I'm engaged to be married to Gwendolen.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And as regards Algernon,
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
may I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend Mr. Bunbury resides?
Oh, no, Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else at the present. In fact, Bunbury's dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Bunbury has exploded. I killed Bunbury this afternoon. Bunbury died this afternoon. I should say that the doctor said that Bunbury could not live, and so Bunbury died.
Well, he seems to have had great confidence in the opinions of his physicians. I am glad that he made up his mind at the last to some definite course of action, and acted under proper medical advice. And now that we have buried Mr. Bunbury at last, may I ask Mr. Worthing, who is that young lady whose hand my nephew Algernon is now holding in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That, Lady Bracknell, is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I'm engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there is anything peculiar in the air of this part of Hertfordshire, but the amount of engagements that seems to go on is considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid down for our guidance. I think some preliminary inquiries on my part would not be out of place. Therefore, Mr. Worthing, who is Miss Cardew?
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, Southwest, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Glen, Fifeshire, Northbury.
Well, that is not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. So far, I am satisfied.
I have also in my possession, you will be pleased to hear, certificate of Miss Cardew's birth, registration, baptism, confirmation, vaccination, whooping cough, and the measles, both the German and the English varieties.
Ah, a life crowded with incident, I see. Although perhaps somewhat too exciting for a young girl, I myself am not in favor of premature experiences. Gwendolyn, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a minute to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, only about £130,000 in the funds. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment. Mr. Worthing, £130,000, and in the funds. Miss Cardew seems to be a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Come here, dear. Oh, sweet child, your dress is sadly simple. And your hair is almost as nature might have left it. But we can soon alter all that. A thoroughly experienced French maid produces a marvelous result in a very brief space of time. I remember recommending one to young Lady Lansing, and after 3 months her own husband did not know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn round. Algernon.
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world. I don't care twopence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. Dear child, you must know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind. But I never dreamed for a moment of letting that stand in my way. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The marriage, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I am not in favor of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's characters before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
Pray excuse me, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you. But I must say this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian. She cannot marry without my consent. Consent which I absolutely decline to heed.
Upon what grounds, may I ask?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew. But I suspect him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible! He is an Oxonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. Yesterday, when I was in London on questions of love, he successfully took the identity of my brother Earnest. Over the course of the next day, he alienated the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly well aware from the first that I have no brother, I never had a brother, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, after careful consideration, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct to you. Come here, dear. How old are you?
Well, I'm really only 18, but I always admit to 20 when I go to evening parties.
Well, it will not be very long until you are of age and free from the restraints of tutelage. So I don't think your guardian's consent, after all, a matter of any importance.
Pray excuse me once again, Lady Bracknell, for interrupting you. But according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cecily does not come of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be any grave objection. London society is full of women of the very highest birth who have remained 35 of their own free choice for years.
Algy, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could. You know I could, Cecily.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time.
And what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark which I am bound to say seems to show a somewhat impatient nature, I must beg of you to reconsider your decision.
Oh, but Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment you consent to my marriage to Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
Mr. Worthing, you must be quite aware that what you ask is out of the question.
Then a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can decide for himself. Come, dear, we must be going.
Is everything quite ready for the christenings?
Christenings? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these men have expressed an immediate desire for christenings.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be christened. Lord Bracknell would be highly displeased if he found out that that was the way in which you wasted your time and money.
Am I to understand then that there are to be no christenings this afternoon?
I must say that as things now stand, Dr. Chasuble, I don't think it would benefit either of us.
It grieves me to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. But I must return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pure that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes. I'm on my way to see her now.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may prove to be one of vital importance to Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a woman of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, and indeed the very picture of respectability.
It is very obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism has been for the last 3 years esteemed companion and valued guardian to Miss Cecily.
I must see this Miss Prism at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting for you there for an hour and 3/4.
Prism! Lady Bracknell! Come here, Miss Prism! Prism, where is that baby? 34 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. Several weeks later, through the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself in a remote corner of Hyde Park. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. The plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mentioned, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out on the perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I intended to place the work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. And in a moment of mental abstraction for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and the baby in the handbag.
But where did you place that handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Oh, Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I demand to know at once where you placed that handbag with the infant inside it.
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble.
Mr. Worthing seems remarkably agitated.
The Guardian has a very emotional nature.
This noise is extremely unpleasant.
It has stopped now.
I wish you would arrive at some conclusion.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Miss Prism, is this the handbag you placed that baby inside? Take a moment before you answer. The happiness of more than one baby depends on your reply.
It appears to be mine. Yes, here's the injuries received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. And here, on the lock, are my initials. This bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm so delighted to have it unexpectedly restored to me. It has been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
More is restored to you than that handbag. I was the baby you placed inside it.
You!
Yes, Mother!
Stop Worthing! I am unmarried!
Unmarried? Oh, I do not deny that is a serious blow. But what right do I have to judge the sins of one who has suffered? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the woman who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid the answer I have to give you might not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Well, I have a brother after all. Cecily, my unfortunate brother. Mistress and Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel, you've never treated me like a brother in all your life. That is going to have to change.
Well, not till today, old boy. I admit I tried my best, though I was out of practice.
My own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you've become someone else?
Oh, good heavens. I'd quite forgotten that matter entirely. I suppose your decision on the subject of my name was quite irrevocable.
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolyn.
Then, Lady Bracknell, a moment. When I was placed in the handbag by Miss Prism, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could afford had been given to you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened, at least that's all that is true. But what was my Christian name?
Naturally, being the eldest, you were christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present recall what the general's Christian name was, but I have no doubt that he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years, and that was as a result of the Indian climate. And marriage. and indigestion, and other things of that kind.
Ouch. Do you know what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would undoubtedly appear on the army lists of the period, wouldn't it, Aunt Augusta?
The general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I have no doubt that he would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. It should have been my constant study. Here it is. M. Generals. M. Generals. Malum, Moxbone, Maglio. What ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Mobs. Moncrief. Lieutenant 1840. Captain, Lieutenant Colonel. Colonel General 1869. Christian names. Ernest John! Gwendolyn, I always told you my Christian name was Earnest. Well, it is Earnest after all. I mean, it naturally is Earnest.
Yes! Oh, I remember now that the general was called Earnest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own Ernest. I knew from the first that you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn, it is a very unfortunate thing to realize that all your life you have been telling nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me?
I can, for I feel you are sure to change.
My own one.
Letitia, you are right. We should be married.
Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last.
Gwendolyn, at last.
My nephew, you seem to be showing signs of triviality.
On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.